The house on Maple Street had always been a quiet sanctuary, a refuge from the chaos of the world outside. Its walls were filled with the laughter of my childhood, the whispered secrets exchanged between siblings, the clinking of dinnerware during nightly meals that my mother prepared with unwavering devotion. Our family home was a haven, where each room held its own tapestry of memories, woven from years of warmth and security. My mother was the architect of this sanctuary, her presence a gentle, guiding force. She was the type of woman whose essence was defined by a ceaseless devotion to her family, the kind of devotion that manifested in the simple routine of keeping a tidy home. To her, cleanliness was next to godliness, a mantra etched into her very being. In the mornings, the house echoed with the serene hum of her daily rituals, the rhythmic scrubbing of floors, the soft swish of a dust cloth over polished wood, the whispered hiss of a broom sweeping away the unseen specks of dirt that dared to invade her domain. It was a symphony of domesticity, a testament to her unyielding love and diligence. To outsiders, her dedication might have seemed excessive, but to us, it was simply the way things were. The house was always immaculate, a testament to her unyielding commitment, a place that felt untainted by the world outside. But then, one day, something changed. It was subtle at first, an almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere of our home. It was as if a shadow had fallen over the sunlit rooms, casting a pall that went unnoticed by all except me. My mother's cleaning habits, once a comforting constant, had taken on an intensity that bordered on fanaticism. She scrubbed surfaces that were already spotless, polished floors until they gleamed like mirrors. Her hands, once gentle, now bore the marks of her relentless labor, red and raw from hours of scrubbing. It was during a quiet afternoon when I first noticed the look in her eyes. She was standing in the kitchen, a sponge in hand, yet there was a peculiar stillness to her that made my skin prickle with unease. Her gaze was fixed on the countertop with an intensity that seemed almost unnatural, as though she could see something that the rest of us could not. I watched from the doorway, a knot of apprehension tightening in my chest as she began to scrub with a fervor that defied reason, her breath coming in shallow gasps, as if she were locked in a silent battle with an invisible foe. "Mom?" I ventured, my voice a hesitant whisper that seemed to shatter the oppressive silence. She did not respond, her movements becoming more frantic, her eyes wide and unblinking as she scoured the surface with a vigor that bordered on desperation. "It's clean," I said, trying to infuse my words with calm reassurance, though my heart was pounding against my ribs. "You've already cleaned it." Her eyes flicked towards me then, and for a moment I saw a flicker of something unfamiliar in her gaze, something dark and unknowable. It was as if I were staring into the depths of a shadowy abyss, a place where logic and reason could not reach, but then it was gone, replaced by the warmth and affection that I had always known. She smiled, a quick, brittle thing that did nothing to ease the tension coiling in my stomach. "Just making sure, dear," she said, her voice light and airy, yet carrying an undercurrent that made the hairs on my arm stand on end. She returned to her task with single-minded determination, her focus unwavering, as if the very fate of our household depended on her efforts. I lingered there for a moment longer, my mind caught in a whirlwind of confusion and mounting dread. But unable to articulate the gnawing unease within me, I retreated to my room, hoping that a good night's sleep would banish the unsettling thoughts from my mind. The days that followed were a blur of escalating tension, my mother's obsession with cleanliness spiraling into a mania that consumed her every waking moment. She scrubbed and polished with a fervor that bordered on frenzy, her hands trembling from the exertion, her eyes hollow and haunted. There were times when I would catch her murmuring under her breath, her words a tangled web of incoherent whispers that sent shivers skittering down my spine. It wasn't long before the rest of the family began to notice the change as well. My father, usually so attuned to the subtleties of his wife's moods, seemed at a loss, his brow furrowed with worry as he watched her toil with an intensity that bordered on madness. My siblings, younger and blissfully unaware, simply continued with their lives, their laughter and antics a balm against the disquiet that had settled over our home like a shroud. One night, the pall of unease grew too heavy to bear, and I found myself standing outside my parents' bedroom, the muffled sound of their voices filtering through the door. I pressed my ear to the wood, my heart thudding in my chest as I strained to catch their words. "It's not like her," my father was saying, his voice a low rumble. "I've never seen her like this before. It's not healthy." "I'm fine," my mother replied, her voice tight and strained. "I just want everything to be perfect. It's important." "What's important?" my father asked gently. "The house is spotless, darling. You've done more than enough." There was a pause, a silence so profound that I feared my own breathing would give me away. Then my mother spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's something wrong. I can feel it. I need to clean it away. I need to scrub all that filthy flesh away." Her words echoed in my mind, a chilling mantra that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. I stumbled back from the door, my heart racing, my skin crawling with a dread that I could not shake. In the days that followed, my mother's obsession deepened, her rituals growing more elaborate, her behavior increasingly erratic. She began to spend hours locked in the bathroom, the sound of running water a constant backdrop to our days. The scent of bleach and disinfectant became a permanent fixture in the air, a sharp tang that seeped into my very bones. I found myself drawn towards the bathroom door one evening, compelled by a force that I could not name. The door was ajar, and I hesitated on the threshold, my instincts screaming at me to turn away, to leave whatever was happening within those walls unobserved. But I could not. Something, curiosity, fear, a need for understanding, pulled me forward, and I peered inside. My mother stood at the sink, her hands plunged into a basin brimming with soapy water. She scrubbed her arms with a vigor that seemed almost inhuman, her skin red and raw beneath the suds. Her reflection in the mirror was a distorted echo of the woman I had known, her eyes dark and hollow, her face a mask of grim determination. She muttered to herself as she worked, her words lost amidst the rush of water and the rasp of a brush against her skin. It was then that I saw it, a shadow flickering across the mirror's surface, a twisting, writhing shape that seemed to coil around her reflection like a serpent. Its presence was a tangible thing, a malevolent force that pressed against my senses, filling me with a bone-deep terror that rooted me to the spot. "Mom!" I cried, my voice a thin thread of panic. She did not respond, her focus unbroken as she continued her relentless scrubbing, her murmurs rising to a fevered pitch. I reached for her, my fingers closing around her arm, the contact jarring her from her trance. She turned to me then, her eyes wide and wild, a stranger wearing my mother's face. "It's dirty," she rasped, her voice a ragged whisper. "I have to clean it. I have to clean it all away." I stumbled back, my mind reeling, my heart pounding with a terror that I could not comprehend. I fled the bathroom, my feet carrying me down the hall, away from the madness that had consumed my mother. But no matter how far I ran, I could not escape the shadow that had taken root in our home. Its presence a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the edges of perception. The following days were a waking nightmare, each moment stretched taut with tension, each breath a struggle against the oppressive weight of despair. My father, desperate to help, sought the counsel of doctors and specialists, their assurances ringing hollow in the face of the inexplicable. My siblings, confused and frightened, clung to one another, their innocence a fragile shield against the encroaching darkness. It was during one such night, when the house was plunged into the heavy silence of restless sleep, that the final thread of normalcy unraveled. I awoke to the sound of footsteps, a soft, shuffling tread that echoed through the hallway like a ghostly procession. I rose from my bed, my heart pounding with a fear that thrummed through my veins like a living thing. I followed the sound, drawn forward by a compulsion that defied reason. The footsteps led me to the attic, a place long forgotten, its entrance a trapdoor hidden beneath the carpet at the end of the hall. I hesitated, my hand trembling as I reached for the pull cord, my mind screaming for me to turn back, to flee from whatever lay in wait above. But curiosity and dread warred within me, and I pulled the cord. The trapdoor swinging open with a groan of protest. The attic was a cavernous space, its beams shrouded in shadows, its corners filled with the detritus of forgotten years. My mother stood at its center, her posture rigid, her head bowed as if in prayer. The air was thick with a palpable tension, a humming energy that thrummed against my skin, like an unseen force. "Mom?" I whispered, my voice breaking the silence like a stone cast into still water. She did not respond, her focus unbroken, her lips moving in a silent incantation. I stepped forward, the floorboards creaking beneath my weight, each step a battle against the invisible bonds of fear that held me in place. As I drew closer, I saw the circle intricately drawn upon the floor, its lines shimmering with an eerie, otherworldly light. Symbols and sigils, their meanings unknowable, danced along the perimeter, a tapestry of arcane design woven from some terrible purpose. At its center, my mother knelt, her hands clasped together, her form illuminated by the unholy glow that emanated from the circle's heart. "Mom!" I cried out, my voice a desperate plea, my mind reeling with the incomprehensible horror unfolding before me. Her head snapped up, her gaze locking onto mine, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. The darkness that had taken root in her eyes flickered, the malevolent shadow coiling within her gaze before it poured forth, spilling into the room like a dark tide. In that moment, I understood. The obsession, the compulsion, the need to cleanse, it was not my mother's own. It was the will of something else, something ancient and unfathomable, a presence that had wormed its way into her mind, twisting her love, her devotion, into something monstrous. The realization broke the spell that held me captive, and I surged forward, my hands reaching for her, my heart pounding with a fierce determination. I grabbed her shoulders, shaking her with a desperation born of love and fear. "Mom, please, you have to stop this. You have to fight it." Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, a brief, fleeting moment, I saw her, the woman I had known and loved, fighting against the tide of darkness that sought to claim her. A flicker of recognition passed between us, a spark of hope amidst the despair. "Help me," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread of sound that cut through the oppressive weight of the darkness. But even as she spoke, the shadows closed in, and she was lost to me, her form dissolving into the void. I screamed, the sound wrenched from the depths of my soul. A raw, primal cry that echoed through the attic, reverberating off the walls like a dirge. The shadows surged forward, enveloping me in their cold embrace, a tide of malice that swept me from my feet, plunging me into an abyss of darkness and despair. When I awoke, the attic was empty, the circle gone, its terrible design erased as if it had never been. My mother was gone, her presence erased from the fabric of our home, leaving behind only a void, a chasm of grief and loss that could never be filled. The house on Maple Street was no longer a sanctuary. Its walls, once filled with laughter and love, now echoed with silence, a hollow, empty sound that reverberated through the empty rooms. My siblings and I wandered its halls like ghosts, our lives overshadowed by the specter of what had been, haunted by the memory of a mother who had been consumed by a darkness that defied understanding. The lingering fear never left me. It clung to me like a second skin, a constant reminder of the shadows that lurk just beyond the edges of perception. It whispered to me in the quiet moments, a voice that spoke of things unseen, of dark forces that waited in the wings, eager to claim their next victim. And so, I cleaned. I scrubbed and polished, my hands moving with a mechanical precision that belied the chaos within my heart. I cleansed the house of every speck of dirt, every stain and blemish, as if by doing so I could somehow erase the darkness that had taken my mother from me. But deep down, I knew the truth. No amount of scrubbing could wash away what had happened. No amount of cleaning could cleanse the shadow that had fallen over our home. It was a stain that could never be removed, a darkness that would forever haunt the corners of my mind. And in the quiet moments, when the world was still and the shadows stretched long and deep, I could almost hear her voice, a soft whispered echo that spoke of love, of loss, and of the terrible, inescapable truth. Some stains could never be scrubbed away. The air felt different when I first entered the old military facility with my dad. It had been abandoned for as long as I could remember, standing like a forgotten monument near the edge of town. Dad used to work there, years before its closure, and he always spoke of it fondly, though guardedly, as if it held secrets he was both eager and reluctant to share. When I was younger, he would tell me stories about the bunker, a labyrinth of concrete corridors and echoing chambers that housed more than just weaponry and soldiers. I always wanted to see it for myself, to touch the walls that held my father's memories. The day we finally set out was clear, the sky a serene blue, framing the weathered edifice against a backdrop of trees. My father walked with a purposeful stride, his eyes gleaming with a mix of nostalgia and something I couldn't quite place. As we approached the entrance, he paused, looking over the structure as if trying to recall something important. Inside, the air was cooler, carrying the smell of earth and rust. Dust motes danced lazily in the beams of light filtering through the high, narrow windows, setting an almost surreal atmosphere. My footsteps echoed on the concrete floor, merging with the distant drip of water seeping through unseen cracks in the walls. Dad led me through the corridors, each turn more disorienting than the last, until we reached a room that seemed to hold his focus. "This is where it all happened," he said, his voice an odd mixture of reverence and dread. I looked around, noting the array of old equipment and machinery, now inert and devoid of purpose. Everything was coated with a fine layer of dust, undisturbed for years. "What happened here?" I asked, curious and slightly unnerved by his tone. "Experiments," he replied, his eyes not meeting mine. "Things that were meant to stay hidden." A shiver ran down my spine. My father was not given to flights of fancy. He was a practical man, grounded in reality, which made his cryptic comments all the more unsettling. Days passed after our visit to the bunker, and Dad became withdrawn. The change was subtle at first, a forgotten appointment here, a missed phone call there, but soon escalated into something more pronounced. He would mumble to himself when he thought I wasn't listening, snippets of words that made little sense. References to the pit and the others peppered his mutterings, leaving an uneasy feeling lingering in our home. His behavior grew stranger. Sometimes he would stand in front of the mirror, studying his reflection as though trying to decipher a puzzle. Other times, I'd catch him standing by the window, staring into the distance with an intensity that seemed out of place in the mundane setting of our neighborhood. I tried to reach out, to ask him about the bunker, about what might have triggered this transformation, but he remained evasive. "It's nothing," he would assure me, with a smile that never reached his eyes. One night, I awoke to a sound that chilled me to the bone. A soft humming coming from downstairs. It was a melody I didn't recognize, yet there was something disturbingly familiar about it. I crept out of bed, my heart pounding as I descended the stairs. The hum grew louder, more insistent, as if drawing me in. I found Dad in the living room, standing motionless in front of the mirror. His eyes were closed, his lips moving silently now, the eerie tune still resonating in the air. I watched, immobilized by a cocktail of fear and curiosity. "Dad?" My voice was barely a whisper. He opened his eyes, and in that instant I knew something was terribly wrong. His gaze was blank, devoid of recognition. It was as if he were looking through me, beyond me, to something only he could see. "Dad, are you okay?" I approached cautiously, my voice trembling. He blinked, recognition slowly returning to his eyes. The corners of his mouth twitched upwards in a semblance of a smile. "I'm fine," he said. Though the words rang hollow, the incident left me shaken, a gnawing sense of dread rooting itself in my mind. I found myself returning to thoughts of the bunker, of the stories he had told, and the secrets that lay buried beneath its concrete facade. Over the next few weeks, I began dreaming of the bunker, vivid, unsettling dreams that left me disoriented upon waking. I would wander its corridors in my sleep, always drawn to a particular spot, a circular chamber with a pit at its center, emanating a palpable sense of presence. In these dreams, I wasn't alone. I could feel others there, their unseen eyes watching, waiting. I confided in a friend, hoping to find some semblance of logic in what was happening. "Maybe it's just stress," she suggested. "You've been through a lot with your dad acting strange, but it didn't feel like stress. It felt like something was reaching out to me from the depths of that place, something old and patient." One evening, driven by an overpowering compulsion, I returned to the bunker alone. As I navigated the familiar corridors, my mind replayed my father's words, things that were meant to stay hidden. The further I ventured, the more the air seemed to thicken with an unseen tension. I found the chamber from my dreams, a forgotten room that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The pit was there, just as I had seen in my sleep, a perfect circle, its depths obscured by shadows. I stood at its edge, peering into the darkness, a muddled blend of fear and curiosity swirling within me. Then I heard it, the same humming, faint but unmistakable, rising from the depths of the pit. My heart stammered as I stepped back, my instinct screaming at me to flee. But before I could move, A voice, my own voice, called out from within the chamber. "Help us." The words echoed around me, a plea that sent a jolt of terror through my veins. I spun around, searching for the source, but I was alone. The voice persisted, growing in intensity, overlapping with other voices, each one a distorted version of my own. I stumbled backward, my mind reeling, and fled the bunker, the voices trailing after me like a phantom chorus outside. The cool night air did little to quell the panic that gripped me. I ran until I reached home, my thoughts a chaotic jumble of confusion and fear. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling as the voices haunted me, their pleas a relentless reminder of what I had encountered. I knew then that whatever lay at the bottom of that pit was connected to my father's change, and perhaps to something much larger and darker. The days that followed were a struggle. I found it increasingly difficult to concentrate, the whispers from the pit invading my thoughts at the most unexpected moments. It was as though the boundary between the conscious and the unconscious had blurred, the bunker's shadow casting itself over every aspect of my life. Dad's condition worsened, his moments of clarity growing fewer and farther between. He seemed consumed by something unseen, his gaze vacant, his demeanor distant. The man who had once been my anchor was becoming a stranger, leaving me adrift in a sea of uncertainty and fear. I resolved to return to the bunker, determined to confront whatever lurked within its depths. Perhaps if I understood what had entwined itself with my father's mind, I could help him. I could help us both. The next day, I armed myself with a flashlight and a rope, my resolve steeling itself against the apprehension that threatened to overwhelm me. As I approached the bunker, the sky was overcast, casting the landscape in a muted gray that mirrored my mood. The familiar corridors led me to the chamber without hesitation, as if my path was preordained. I stood at the edge of the pit, the flashlight's beam slicing through the darkness. The humming rose to greet me, a sinister lullaby that beckoned me closer. I secured the rope around my waist, anchoring it to a sturdy metal column before descending into the abyss. As the light penetrated the depths, shadowy figures emerged from the darkness. Countless versions of myself, their faces twisted in silent anguish. It was unnerving seeing my own likeness mirrored in such grotesque forms, each one a reflection of fear and despair. They reached out, their eyes pleading, their mouths forming words I couldn't hear. The humming grew louder, the air vibrating with an energy that resonated deep within my bones. I released the flashlight, allowing it to dangle from my wrist as I reached the bottom. The ground was uneven, the chamber walls lined with engravings that pulsed with a faint, otherworldly light. It was a language I couldn't comprehend, yet it seemed to pulse with a rhythm that matched the beating of my heart. The figures closed in, their presence oppressive, suffocating. I struggled to breathe, the weight of the atmosphere pressing down upon me. And then, amid the cacophony of whispers, a single voice broke through. Strong, commanding, familiar. "Leave this place." It was my father's voice, distinct and clear, cutting through the noise with a certainty that left no room for doubt. The doppelgangers recoiled as if struck, their forms flickering before they dissolved into the shadow. I hesitated, caught between the primal urge to obey and the burning curiosity that had driven me this far. But the command was insistent, carrying with it the promise of safety, of sanity. I turned, my feet moving of their own accord, pulling me away from the pit and back towards the surface. As I climbed, the humming faded, the voices silenced, leaving only the sound of my own labored breaths echoing in the narrow space. I emerged into the chamber, disoriented but relieved to feel solid ground beneath my feet once more. In the days that followed, I was haunted by what I had seen, the memory of those twisted reflections lingering in the corners of my mind. Dad remained unchanged, his condition stable yet distant, as though he existed on a plane apart from the rest of us. The bunker loomed large in my thoughts, a specter of what lay beneath the surface of our reality. I knew I couldn't return, not without risking a further descent into madness, but the voices, the whispers, they were a part of me now, a constant reminder of the darkness that lay below. As time passed, I learned to live with the lingering fear, the knowledge that the world was not as it seemed, that there were depths best left unexplored. The shadows of the bunker remained, a testament to secrets untold, mysteries unresolved, and yet, amid the uncertainty, there was a sliver of hope, a belief that perhaps, in facing the darkness, I had reclaimed a part of myself, a piece of my father, that would otherwise have been lost to the void. The house at the end of our cul-de-sac was the oldest on the street, standing with a quiet dignity that seemed to imbue it with an air of authority among the newer, more modern homes. My family had lived there for generations, each one leaving their indelible mark. An extension here, a fresh coat of paint there, yet always preserving the essence of the house. It had seen the passage of time, and with it, the stories and secrets of my ancestors. I moved back into this ancestral home after my grandmother passed away, seeking solace in its familiar creaks and whispers amidst the chaos of my life. The rooms were spacious, filled with an eclectic mix of furniture from different eras. There was a comforting smell of aged wood and forgotten memories, a scent that I had come to associate with safety and warmth. The sunlight filtered through the lace curtains in the living room, casting intricate patterns on the hardwood floor, and the gentle hum of the grandfather clock in the hallway marked the passage of time with a reassuring regularity. Life settled into a gentle routine. I worked from home, my days spent in front of my laptop in the study, breaking only to take long, meandering walks in the overgrown garden. The dreams that had begun to take on a bit of a life of their own had slowly, it was an idyllic existence, one that I cherished until an unexpected guest arrived, a child no more than 10 years old, with wild curls and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through me. He came knocking one afternoon, his small hand rapping against the heavy oak door with a confidence that belied his age. When I opened the door, he stood there, his clothes slightly too large for his slender frame, his sneakers scuffed and worn. "Hello," he said, his voice steady and clear. "I'm Jacob. I live down the street." There was something unsettling about him, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Perhaps it was his eyes, or the way he stood so still. Nevertheless, I invited him in, offering him a glass of lemonade as any good neighbor would. He accepted, taking a seat at the kitchen table, his gaze wandering around the room as if he were cataloging each item. We talked for a while. Jacob mentioned his mother, who worked long hours, leaving him to explore the neighborhood on his own. He was curious about the house, its age and history, and I found myself recounting stories of my childhood, of the games I played in the attic and the adventures I had in the garden. He listened intently, his eyes never leaving mine. As the afternoon sun dipped below the horizon, Jacob stood up suddenly, his demeanor shifting. Dana and Jacob stood up suddenly, his demeanor... "I should go," he said, his voice tinged with an urgency that hadn't been there before. He thanked me for the lemonade and left, leaving a tangible stillness in his wake. I watched him walk down the street until he disappeared from view, a small, solitary figure against the twilight. I didn't think much of it at first. children often wandered around the neighborhood, curious and bold. But Jacob's visits became frequent, always unannounced, and always welcomed. Each time he seemed more interested in the house, asking questions about the rooms I rarely used, particularly the attic, which had been locked for years. His fascination with that space struck me as odd, but I dismissed it as childish curiosity. One evening, after Jacob had left, I decided to investigate the attic. Armed with a flashlight, I climbed the creaky stairs, each step echoing ominously in the silence. The door was stiff, reluctant to open, as if guarding some long-forgotten secret. When it finally gave way, I was met with a musty scent and a dim space cluttered with old trunks and forgotten treasures. My flashlight beam danced across the room, illuminating dust motes that twirled in the stale air. As I stood there, a strange sensation washed over me, a prickling at the nape of my neck, a feeling of being watched. I shook it off, chalking it up to my imagination. Yet the unease lingered, even as I closed the attic door behind me and descended the stairs. In the days that followed, that peculiar sensation grew stronger, a constant undercurrent to my daily life. Jacob's visits continued, and with each one the feeling intensified. He seemed to know things about the house that I had forgotten, or perhaps never known. Little details, like the way the floorboards creaked in the dining room, or the drafty window in the guest bedroom. His knowledge unsettled me, but his presence was oddly comforting, like an old friend visiting from another time. It was during one of his visits that he asked a question that sent a chill down my spine. "Have you ever seen the door?" he inquired, his blue eyes locking onto mine. "The one that leads beyond?" I was taken aback. "What do you mean, Jacob? There's no such door in this house." "Yes, there is," he insisted, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's in the attic, behind the old wardrobe." A cold shiver ran through me. I had been in the attic, seen the wardrobe he spoke of, but I had never noticed any door. Yet his certainty was unnerving, as if he had seen something I hadn't. That night, after Jacob left, I couldn't shake his words from my mind. They echoed in the silence, growing louder with each passing hour. Driven by an inexplicable compulsion, I found myself climbing the attic stairs once more, the flashlight heavy in my grip. The wardrobe stood there, just as I had left it, imposing and silent. With trembling hands, I opened its doors, revealing a jumble of moth-eaten coats and forgotten trinkets. I pushed them aside, my fingers brushing against the back panel. It was then that I felt it, a slight draft, cool and unnatural. My heart thudded in my chest as I pressed against the panel, which gave way with a soft click, revealing a narrow, shadowed passageway. I stood there transfixed, as the air around me seemed to hum with an unfamiliar energy. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to flee down the stairs and never return, but something, a morbid curiosity, perhaps, propelled me forward. The passageway was cramped, the walls pressing in on either side. I moved slowly, the flashlight beam flickering as if protesting the intrusion. The air was colder here, and with each step, the feeling of being watched intensified. It was as if the house held its breath, waiting for something, or someone, to make itself known. At the end of the passage, I found a door. Its wood dark and unyielding, an ornate handle beckoned, its surface cool to the touch. I hesitated, my hand poised over it, caught between the urge to open it and the fear of what lay beyond. Finally, summoning every ounce of courage, I turned the handle. The door swung open with a creak, revealing a room that was both familiar and alien. It looked like my attic, yet it was not. The furniture was arranged differently, the light more subdued, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. In the center stood Jacob, his back to me, gazing out a window that didn't exist in my world. "Jacob," I called, my voice fragile in the oppressive silence. He turned slowly, his eyes now a deep, unsettling black, void of the warmth they once held. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice echoing with an unnatural resonance. "It's not safe." Fear gripped me, heavy and paralyzing. I wanted to run, to escape this twisted reflection of my home, but it was as if the very air conspired to hold me in place. Jacob took a step toward me, his movements fluid and deliberate. "This place," he continued, "it's different. It's where the old things come to rest. Things that should remain forgotten." I tried to speak, to demand answers, but my words were swallowed by the darkness. The room began to close in, the walls towering above me, shifting and twisting like a living entity. The very fabric of reality seemed to unravel, threads of light and shadow intertwining in an incomprehensible dance. Jacob reached out, his fingers brushing against my arm in a gesture that was both comforting and terrifying. "You need to leave," he urged, his voice urgent and insistent. "Before it finds you." "What is it?" I managed to ask, my voice cracking under the weight of my fear. He hesitated, glancing toward the shadows that loomed ever closer. "The keeper of secrets," he whispered. "The one who watches. It knows you're here." A low, rumbling growl resonated from the depths of the room, a sound that vibrated through my bones and threatened to shatter my sanity. The shadows converged, coalescing into a form that was both formless and terrible, an embodiment of every nightmare I had ever known. Panicked, I stumbled backward, my flashlight clattering to the floor. Jacob's expression was one of profound sadness, a sorrow that seemed to transcend time and space. "Run," he implored, as the darkness surged forward, its malevolent presence suffocating and all-consuming. I turned and fled, the passageway stretching endlessly before me as I raced back to the attic. The door slammed shut behind me with a deafening finality, sealing off the other world and its horrors. I collapsed on the attic floor, gasping for breath, my heart racing with a frantic rhythm. For days, I avoided the attic, that festering well of mysteries and dread, though the house seemed to whisper its secrets in my dreams. Jacob did not return, but his presence lingered, a shadow on the periphery of my consciousness. I found myself glancing toward the attic door with a morbid curiosity, the memory of that other place etched into my mind. I wondered if he was trapped there, in that mirror world, or if he was ever truly real at all. A product of my imagination, perhaps, or a remnant of some forgotten tale that the house had absorbed over the years. The questions gnawed at me, unanswered and unanswerable. Life resumed its quiet rhythm, yet the sense of normalcy was forever tinged with unease. I never ventured into the attic again, leaving it to its secrets and shadows. The door remained locked, a barrier between my world and the unknown. Yet, the fear persisted, a companion in the solitude of my nights, a reminder of a reality that lay just beyond the veil of the ordinary. I came to understand that some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed. They linger in the mind, a tantalizing whisper of what lies beyond, in the unseen corners of our existence. And though I tried to forget, to bury the memories among the ghosts of my past, they resurfaced in quiet moments, in the stillness of the house that watched and waited. For in this place, where time folds and reality frays, the past is never truly gone. It lingers, a haunting presence just out of sight, waiting for the brave or the foolish to seek it out. Beyond the door, the shadows remain, watching, waiting for the next curious soul to stumble into their embrace. And in the heart of the house, the secrets endure, woven into its very bones, whispering their eerie lullabies to those who dare to listen. There are places in this world that defy explanation, whose very foundations seem to hold secrets older than time itself. At the edge of a nondescript town in Michigan, nestled among the gnarled trees of a forgotten road, stands a house that no one dares to approach. It is a place whispered about in hushed tones, a relic of something that should never have been. Its walls are weathered by countless seasons, and its windows, like vacant eyes, stare out onto the world with a resigned patience. This house, they say, has no doors. I first heard about the doorless house when I was a child. My grandmother, a woman wise with age and the keeper of many stories, would regale me with tales of the haunted places she had encountered in her lifetime. The house, she said, was not always devoid of doors. Once it had been a lively home, brimming with warmth and laughter. But something had happened there, an event so profound that it had transformed the house into something otherworldly. It had expelled its doors, sealed its secrets within, and waited. Years later, with my grandmother's tales etched into my memory, I found myself inexplicably drawn to the stories of the doorless house. An author by trade, my penchant for the macabre had led me to write about the darker corners of human imagination. But the house was different. It was not a mere figment of human fear, but a real place that begged to be understood. And so, on a crisp autumn day, driven by a blend of curiosity and an unshakable sense of destiny, I decided to see the house for myself. The journey to the house was more arduous than I anticipated. The road, long forgotten by maps, was a winding path through dense woods that seemed to close in on me with every step. Leaves rustled in the gentle breeze, whispering secrets I could not comprehend. As I emerged from the trees, the house loomed before me, its presence more imposing than I had imagined. There it stood, a solitary figure against the backdrop of the dying sun, its silhouette stark and haunting. The absence of doors was the first thing I noticed. The walls were seamless, the bricks interlocked with a precision that defied the passage of time. Windows, too, seemed more akin to paintings than portals, offering no entry into the house's shadowed bowels. I circled the perimeter, searching for any sign of an entrance, but found none. And yet, as I stood there, an inexplicable pull urged me to stay, to unravel the mysteries it held tightly within. As dusk settled into night, the air grew heavy with an expectant silence. I had brought supplies, intending to camp outside the house, hoping to glimpse whatever phenomenon had caused this architectural anomaly. I settled into my makeshift campsite, the house's silhouette a constant presence at the edge of my vision. The night wore on, the stars above a comforting reminder of the world beyond this enigma. It was in the stillness of early morning, when the first hints of dawn crept over the horizon, that I saw it. A flicker of movement in one of the windows, a brief glint that caught the corner of my eye. I stumbled to my feet, heart thundering in my chest, and as I approached, the glint resolved into a soft glow emanating from within. Compelled by an urge I could not resist, I reached out to touch the glass. It was warm, as if the house itself was alive, breathing slowly beneath my fingers. The glow intensified, and before my astonished eyes, the bricks of the wall began to shift. They moved with a fluid grace, rearranging themselves to reveal an opening, a door, where none had been. It beckoned me with a silent invitation, a passage into the unknown. Cautiously, I stepped inside. The interior was both mesmerizing and disorienting. The walls seemed to hum with energy, colors shifting in and out of focus, as if the house were dreaming and I had become a part of its reverie. The rooms were inconstant, their shapes altering as I moved through them. A corridor would stretch indefinitely, only to contract into a cozy nook the moment I glanced away. The furniture, though sparse, appeared to glide effortlessly across the floors, their movements synchronized in a ghostly ballet. Time lost its meaning within those walls. Hours became mere suggestions, and as the house reshaped itself around me, I felt my grip on reality begin to slip. Yet, even amidst the bewildering transformations, a part of me felt at home, as if the house recognized me, and I it. The first disturbance came when I found myself in a room filled with mirrors. Their surfaces were pristine, reflecting 1,000 fractured images of myself. But as I gazed into them, I noticed something unsettling. The reflections did not mimic my movements. Instead, they carried on with their own. Each image of me captured in different moments. My heart pounded as I watched one reflection smile, another frown, while yet another placed a finger upon lips in a gesture of silence. Disturbed, I backed away, heart racing. The mirrors seemed to pulse with a life of their own, and as I turned to leave, the house responded. The walls closed in. The door through which I had entered vanished, replaced by a solid expanse of unyielding bricks. Panic surged through me, but before I could react, the room shifted again. I found myself in a spiral staircase that wound upwards, its steps glowing faintly in the dim light. There was no other way to go but up. As I ascended, I felt a force drawing me higher, a presence that guided my steps with an unseen hand. Each step resonated with a hollow echo, the sound enveloping me as I climbed toward an unknown destination. At the top of the staircase, I arrived at a study, its walls lined with ancient tomes, whose spines bore titles in languages I could not decipher. A large window dominated one wall, though it revealed nothing but an impenetrable fog. At the center of the room stood a desk, upon which lay a single, worn journal. I approached the desk, the air around me thick with anticipation. The journal's pages were yellowed with age, its cover embossed with an intricate emblem that seemed to shift and shimmer as if alive. With trembling hands, I opened it, the pages whispering secrets as they turned. The words within were a revelation. They spoke of the house's origin, of an architect driven by visions of a place that defied the natural order. He had poured his soul into its creation, his designs guided by forces beyond human comprehension. The house, it seemed, was a nexus, a meeting point between worlds, and the architect its keeper. But something had gone awry. The house had turned against him, transforming him within its ever-changing walls. As I read, a chill crept over me. The journal's final entry was dated decades ago, yet the ink was as fresh as if penned moments before. The architect's last words spoke of his descent into madness, of becoming one with the house, and the inevitable loss of self. The realization struck me with a profound clarity. The house was not merely a structure, but a living entity, and I was now part of its story. With growing dread, I closed the journal and turned to leave the study. But as I did, the room shifted once more. The floor beneath me dissolved, and I found myself tumbling through space, the world around me a blur of color and sound. My mind twisted with the vertigo of the unknown, and when at last I landed, it was with a gentle thud upon a plush carpet. I was in yet another room, this one filled with the gentle strains of music, echoing from an unseen source. The sound was disarming, its melody soothing my frazzled nerves like a lullaby. Yet beneath its charm lay an undercurrent of melancholy, a poignant reminder of the house's history. As the music faded, I heard whispers, voices ancient and wise, recounting tales of those who had come before me. They spoke of longing and regret, of lives spent searching for an escape that never came. The whispers grew louder, merging into a cacophony that surged through the room. I pressed my hands to my ears, desperate to block out the sound, but still, it persisted. The house was speaking to me, its voice a symphony of despair, and I was powerless to resist. Suddenly, the cacophony ceased, replaced by a profound silence that pressed in on me from all sides. The room darkened, the walls closing in until I stood in a space no larger than a closet. It was then that I realized the house was testing me, measuring my resolve. I needed to find a way out, to break free of its grip before it consumed me entirely. Heart pounding in my chest, I focused my thoughts. I pictured the world outside, the trees and sky, the feel of the wind on my face. I imagined the door that had appeared to let me in, willing it to manifest once more. The house resisted, its walls shuddering with indignation, but I held fast, determined to escape. And then, with a sound like the sigh of 1,000 souls, the walls parted. Before me was the door, a shimmering portal that flickered with the light of dawn. Without a second thought, I surged forward, feeling the house's reluctance as it released me from its grasp. I stumbled onto the grass, the fresh air filling my lungs with life. The sun had risen, painting the world in hues of gold and amber. Behind me, the house stood unchanged, its secrets intact, waiting for the next soul to wander into its embrace. As I walked away, the events of the night lingered in my mind, an indelible mark on my soul. I had glimpsed the heart of an enigma, felt the pulse of something beyond comprehension. The house, with its shifting rooms and supernatural architecture, was a reminder of the mysteries that lay beyond human understanding. And though I had escaped, a part of me remained within its walls, forever entwined with the tale of the doorless house. The whispers of the house followed me, a haunting refrain that echoed in the recesses of my mind. I knew I could never truly leave it behind. Its presence would shadow me, a ghostly reminder of the thin boundary between reality and the unknown. And as I returned to the world of the living, I could not help but wonder how many others had fallen into the house's embrace, never to return. The doorless house stood silent and still, a relic of a forgotten time, its secrets intact. And somewhere, deep within its walls, the architect's spirit lingered, watching over his creation as it continued to weave its tale through the fabric of time. For in the end, the house was more than a mere structure. It was a story, ever-changing, and I had become a part of its endless narrative. The old Fisher house stood at the edge of town, nestled deep in the woods like an ancient sentinel watching over the passage of time. It was a relic of the past, a decaying monument to a forgotten era. The townsfolk often spoke of it in hushed whispers, sharing tales of its haunting presence. Superstition ran deep, as did the roots of the trees surrounding it, yet nobody dared to encroach upon its territory, save for the occasional thrill-seeking teenagers. For me, it was simply a house, a place that held the kind of allure only found in things left untouched by human hands for too long. I had always been drawn to places like the Fisher house, places that seemed to possess a life of their own. Perhaps it was the quiet that followed me into such spaces, or maybe it was the feeling of stepping into another world, one left behind by those who had come before. When I first set foot on the path leading up to the front porch, the wind rustled the leaves in a gentle symphony, as if welcoming me into its fold. The wooden floorboards creaked under my weight, each step an echo of the lives that had once filled this space with laughter and sorrow alike. The air inside was cool, with the scent of dust and time hanging thick. Sunlight filtered through cracked windows, casting strange shadows on the walls. I wandered through the rooms, my footsteps soft on the worn carpet and creaky floors. There was a beauty in the decay, in the peeling wallpaper and the cobwebs that adorn every corner like tattered lace. It wasn't until I reached the study that I felt the air shift, an inexplicable heaviness settling in the pit of my stomach. The study was small and cluttered, with bookshelves lining the walls and papers strewn across the desk. On the far side, a solitary diary lay open, its pages yellowed with age. I approached it with an odd mix of curiosity and trepidation. The first thing I noticed was the handwriting, elegant and flowing as though penned by someone who had once cared deeply about their words. I hesitated for a moment before reading, feeling the weight of the past pressing against me. The entries were mundane at first, recounting daily life in the Fisher household. But as I read on, a sense of unease began to take hold. There was something unsettling about the words, as if they harbored a secret known only to the writer. The diary spoke of strange occurrences, a shadow that moved independently of the light, a voice that whispered in the dead of night. It was almost as though the house itself was alive, breathing its ghosts into the very fabric of its being. I closed the diary, a chill running down my spine. The atmosphere of the house had changed, growing darker and more oppressive. It was as if I had awakened something that had long lain dormant. I tried to shake off the feeling, attributing it to an overactive imagination, but the sense of being watched persisted. I decided to leave, resolving to return another day and finish reading the diary in the safety of daylight. As I stepped back into the woods, the wind seemed to whisper secrets between the trees. A faint echo of the diary's words. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had taken something with me, that the house had imprinted itself on my consciousness. That night, the shadows in my room stretched farther than they should have, and the wind outside sounded eerily like a distant voice calling my name. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself drawn back to the Fisher house with an urgency I couldn't quite understand. The diary had become an obsession, a puzzle I felt compelled to solve. Each visit peeled back another layer of mystery, revealing fragments of a life intertwined with something dark and unknowable. The entries grew increasingly erratic, filled with fear and desperation. There were mentions of dreams that bled into reality, of an unseen presence that lingered just beyond sight. I began to notice changes in myself as well. Sleep came fitfully, plagued by nightmares of the house and its spectral inhabitants. I heard whispers in the quiet moments, voices that seemed to rise from the very walls of my mind. Friends commented on my distracted demeanor, but I brushed off their concerns with a forced smile. I knew I was unraveling, caught in a web spun by the diary's cursed words, but I couldn't stop. I needed answers, a way to make sense of the growing chaos. The escalation came to a head one moonless night when I returned to the house, determined to finish reading the diary once and for all. The air was thick with anticipation, and the house loomed before me, a dark silhouette against the starless sky. As I stepped inside, a chill swept through me, more intense than anything I had felt before. The walls felt closer, the shadows deeper, as if the house was closing in around me. I hurried to the study, the diary waiting for me like an old friend. The pages were filled with a frantic scrawl, the words barely legible, describing visions of a world beyond our own, a world of darkness and despair. Whispered promises of knowledge and power that came at a terrible cost. As I read, a pressure built in my chest, and the air seemed to hum with a presence I couldn't see. The climax was swift and brutal. A violent gust of wind tore through the room, scattering papers and sending books tumbling from their shelves. The diary's pages flipped wildly, as though an invisible hand guided them. The diary's pages flipped wildly, as though an invisible hand guided them. I stumbled back, my heart racing as the whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices demanding to be heard. A shadow moved across the wall, coalescing into a form that was both human and not, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. In that moment, I understood. The diary was a gateway, a conduit for something beyond our comprehension. It had woven its tendrils into the very essence of the house, and now sought to do the same with me. Panic surged through me, and I turned to flee, the shadow stretching out towards me like fingers grasping for my soul. I don't remember how I escaped, only that I found myself outside, the cool night air a balm to my frayed nerves. The house stood silent and foreboding behind me, its secrets locked once again within its walls. But the diary had left its mark, a lingering fear that clung to me like a second skin. I could still hear the whispers, feel the presence lurking in the corners of my mind. The Fisher house had claimed a piece of me, a part that would never truly be free. In the days that followed, I tried to return to normalcy, to forget the horrors I had unleashed. But the house and its cursed diary were always there, a shadow at the edge of my thoughts. I found solace in routine, in the familiar rhythms of life, but the fear remained, a silent companion that whispered of things that should not be. I knew I could never return to the Fisher house, yet its call was undeniable, a siren song that promised answers and demanded a price I was unwilling to pay. The diary's pages were seared into my memory, a reminder of the darkness that lay just beyond the veil of this world. And though I tried to move forward, to close the door on that chapter of my life, I couldn't help but feel that the house would one day find me again. The Fisher house stood as it always had, a monument to its own mysteries, waiting for the next soul to uncover its secrets. And somewhere deep in its shadowed halls, the diary rested, its words poised to ensnare another,